Okay, so I have no idea if this camera is working correctly. It's the first time that I use it towards me. Usually I film with it by showing other things than myself, but we will try. And if I see that there is something wrong, I will use my iPhone again, because I'm used to my iPhone and it's simpler for me. Anyway, today I have a big subject. Yes, I'm cleaning in the same time. I never lose time. Okay, I've been always wondering what Tim Friese-Greene was doing and what Hollis was doing in the compositions and in the arrangements. A lot of people say different things. Some people say that Hollis did it all. Other people said without Tim Friese-Greene, Hollis didn't do much. I'm absolutely sure it's not true, because if you listen to the Party's Over or the Hollis solo album, you perfectly see that he's totally able to do it by himself, or almost. I mean, you recognize the compositions. The compositions, even if it's very different in the Party's Over and very different in the Hollis solo album, you recognize the person who wrote. I was wondering what's the deal exactly, and I never did a video about that because I didn't know what to say. Seriously, I had no idea what was right, what was wrong, and I don't like to talk about things that I don't know. I don't know much more now, but I found something which gave me an opinion, and my opinion may be wrong. Maybe I'm not totally objective because I really like a lot. I love Hollis, so of course I'm going to see more his side, but it seems that I may be right. So I found, completely randomly, actually I don't even remember how I arrived there. Oh yeah, I know. I was listening to Tim Friese-Greene's songs on YouTube, and then I thought, oh, I will see if he did interviews and if he explains how they were composing together, Hollis and him. And that's how I arrived on this interview. We can't automatically believe Tim Friese-Greene. Of course, he is on his side. It's not so much what he says, but more the way he says it, which gives a lot of information. So the interview, I printed it because I like to write notes on the side, you know. You can't really do that on a computer. The author of the interview is John Clarkson. Oh, the website didn't print. That's weird. Anyway, I will write you the website in the description box, but it's an English website because I remember that I saw the name. It was made, the interview was at least published in May 2006, so 10 years ago about. And what I don't understand is that the author of the article is John Clarkson, but in the answer and questions, the initial of the journalist are PB. So maybe someone else asked the questions and someone else wrote the article. I don't know. I try to understand, but I don't know. So I will give you the link to the interview if you want to see everything related to Tim Friese-Greene. Of course, my purpose here is more to see what he was doing with Hollis and not what he was doing outside of Hollis. I mean, before and after, just to let you know that before working with Talk Talk, he did in 1981 the Tight Fits. It's a band song, The Lion Sleeps Tonight. So it's a very famous song. Even in France, it has been redone in French. It was very famous. Honestly, I don't like much this song. I have no idea why it had so much success. And obviously Tim Friese-Greene says that he's not either very excited about this song, that he wanted to be famous with other things than that, Oops, sorry. Alert on my phone. It's always bad news. Anyway, I don't like, as we say in French, cracher dans la soupe. It means to split in the soup. It means you make money with something and then you criticize it. If you eat every day thanks to something, I think you must at least say thank you, even if you don't especially like the song. Well, I think it's not very smart to say it in an interview, even if he thinks it, of course. So then in the interview, the guy is asking him, how from that did you become involved with Talk Talk? So he says that Mark Hollis noticed that he had several records in the chart, Tim Friese-Greene, and they were all different. So what Mark Hollis liked is that he didn't have a signature, a style. He was not doing all the songs by the same style, and that's exactly what Mark Hollis wanted. That's why Mark Hollis wanted to work with him, if I understood well. Tim Friese-Greene says that he didn't feel the need to have a signature sound, and I think that's good because he's able to adapt himself to every song or to every band. That's good. Then the question is, what was the appeal to you of them? And he answers, I'm not sure there was an appeal to me actually. There was nothing remarkable about Talk Talk at that point. Okay. I thought their first album, The Party's Over, was okay. I didn't particularly rate the songwriting at that time, but I thought that Mark sounded okay. I took it on because there was nothing else around that. I wanted to do more at the time, and there was nothing I disliked more than not working at that stage. So once again, I think he's very sincere in his answers, but maybe it was not necessary to say that, because first, I think that Party's Over is a little more than just okay. And when you listen to Mark Hollis' voice, I'm sorry, but we could see there was a lot of potential. The melodies were great. It's not because the style maybe was not his that he can dismiss such an album. I think it's a very good album. Of course, not produced as Mark Hollis would have wanted. I mean, the arrangements and everything, but still, if you take just the melodies and the lyrics, it's really, really, really good, and the voice really good, and the musicians are not bad. I don't understand that. Anyway, so then it's when we arrive about the co-writing. You were co-credited with half of the songs on It's My Life, and then all the songs on the 3 subsequent albums. How much experience of songwriting have you had by the stage of It's My Life? So I need to read the answer by Tim Friese-Greene. He answers, very little. I had co-written things with other people, some of which had been published and some which hadn't. Mark didn't have enough material for the album. We both clicked quite well at an early stage, and he suggested that we try and write together. I would have never had the temerity to do so myself, because it's not a thing that a producer does, puts himself forward as a co-writer. It would have been pretty leery. We used to write on a piano in the front room of my house at the time. I obviously felt that I could deal with it, though I had had a bit of experience at songwriting, but nothing particularly major. So it's when I'm wondering who does what. I mean, who is playing the piano? Who is singing the melody? The lyrics are coming after, I suppose. Yes, usually the lyrics come always after. So it's not very clear. I think it's very nice from Mark Hollis to ask the guy to write with him. Mark Hollis is someone who likes to work with someone else. Probably it's more fun than being alone and creating, and maybe it gives a deeper wealth, we say richness, I'm not sure, because you have another perspective from someone else, but it's unclear so far. You are often credited as being the unofficial fourth member of the band. The band toured until 1986, but you never actually toured with them, is that right? And he answers, yes, I never did. I played one gig at the Montreux Jazz Festival in 1986, but that was all I ever did. Were you ever actually officially a member of the group? So it means that he is asking if he had a contract with the group, and he answers, no. I was very clear from the beginning that I didn't want to be a member of the band, even though I was asked to. I knew that there would come a point in which I would want to officially walk away from it, and I wanted to be able to do that without any strings attached. So I was very careful to keep my autonomy. I knew that if I was ever officially a member of the band, then I would feel that my role would have to change and I would have to demand more, say, in musical direction. When I was the producer, I was happy to respect the sovereignty of the band, means Mark in terms of what it did. To work, it had to accommodate his worldview, if you like. That is what I saw the producer's job as being. I thought that it would be very dangerous for me to see myself as a band member because I felt that it would give me extra rights and would create difficulties. So I can understand that. He's a producer, he's not a member of the band. I see him as a producer-arranger, not as a part of the band, I think. So then they are talking about the end of Tok Tok. The guy, the journalist says, asks, the band, however, for all intensive purposes, really stopped being a band in 1986. It evolved into something far beyond that. Would you agree with that? And Tim Friese-Greene answers, I think the thing that made it marginal as an outfit was the fact that Mark decided after The Color of Spring that he didn't want to tour anymore. That made it very difficult for the other members. After The Color of Spring, we dispensed with other keyboard players totally because Mark and I thought between us that we could cover that bass, and we did. Mark and I had such a good understanding that it was source of continual frustration to us that we had to constantly explain to other musicians what we wanted. In the end, we would just shrug and say, we will do it then. We started to play more and more of the stuff ourselves and to cut out the middlemen. We didn't have to verbalize so much that way to get people to understand where we wanted to go with it. And to some extent that became the case with the other instruments as well. Neither of us could play drums. Okay. So Lee Harris, Tok Tok's regular drummer, was always dragooned into playing drums when they weren't done synthetically. Paul Webb, Tok Tok's bassist, fell beside the wayside after Spirit of Eden. Mark even plays some of the bass on that, though, if I remember rightly. Wow. So it means that Mark Hollis played some bass also on Spirit of Eden, even though Paul Webb was still there. Well, you know, usually musicians, when they play guitar, it's not very difficult for them to play bass guitar. I see that with my son, for example. He plays piano and guitar, and he has a bass guitar too because he's able to do so. Same thing for my ex-husband. At a point he bought a bass guitar. He told me it was really easy to play it, especially when you know how to play guitar. So that's interesting. I understand now why they were playing almost everything. So, most interesting question. How did you and Mark write songs after It's My Life? Was it mainly through improvisation? So Tim Friese-Greene answers, It changed from album to album. On The Color of Spring, we started off with loops. Generally arrived on the Fairlight 2, which I had just bought. I remember in 1984, 5, 6, Fairlight was the thing that all musicians wanted to buy. We wanted to buy a Fairlight, my ex-husband and I, but it was so expensive, we couldn't. And then Spirit of Eden was largely written on a drum machine. We then replaced it with Lee, whereas on Laughing Stock we started with drum patterns. Yes, Phil Brown says so on his book. So we started with drum patterns that came from Lee, playing them in the rehearsal room. We then wrote the songs around the drum patterns that he came up with. All of the 3 major albums started in different ways. Okay, so that's interesting, because starting from loops, starting from drum machine, starting from drums, it's not what I call exactly composing a song. Yes, it's composing a song, because they are going to invent a song by starting from something. My ex-husband used to do like that. He was starting with loops. It's like how to explain that if you don't know what is a loop. It's like a gimmick which comes back and like harmonies. It's very difficult to explain. It's for example, Living in Another World, for example, the song things like that then can give you a melody. It's a way to write songs. But I still have the feeling that Marcolis came with melodies which were already made before. Or maybe they had the melody and they started the loop by trying to put the melody on it. I don't know how they were doing that. But when I hear things like that, it makes me more think of arrangements. Well, you give me a loop, I can write you a song like that. It's easy. I'm not saying it's easy, no, not everybody can do that, but it's not as difficult as coming up with a melody by starting on nothing, just having a melody which comes like that. It happened to me to write melodies just which came like that, but only in my dreams. I mean, I dream of a melody and sometimes I remember it in the morning. Sorry, too many catastrophes today. It's very difficult to create a melody just like that, out of the blue. Of course, if you start from a loop, it gives you already harmonies, chords. It gives you a direction to create your melody. Same thing with a drum pattern. It can inspire you a melody, so I understand that. But once again, who did what? I mean, did Marcolis came with a melody on the loops, or the melody were coming from Tim Friese-Greene, or Marcolis was writing the beginning of, I don't know, a chorus and Tim Friese-Greene the end, you know. It always made me laugh when I think of people composing together, because who did what, who had the idea the first, and what part of the song is the most easy to remember. Then the person who wrote the more memorable part of a song is obviously the one who wrote the most of the song. For example, for the Doors, Light My Fire, the gimmick of the beginning, so that was written by Raymond Zarek. So does it make him the writer of the song, even though it's not the melody? In that case, I think so, because the gimmick at the beginning is a big part of the song. It's why we remember of the song. So I think in that case, I think that they were credited, because I think that the Doors were signing all together until the Soft Parade. After the Soft Parade, everyone took what he was doing, if I remember well, about the Doors. But in the case of Tim Friese-Greene and Marcolis, I really would like to know who wrote what, And who wrote the melody and who wrote the lyrics? I think that the lyrics mostly are by Hollis, I think, because I recognize the same style all the time. So far I have the feeling that Tim Friese-Greene is more an arranger than really a composer of the melody. I mean, he probably composed some loops, some gimmicks, but it doesn't mean that he created the melody. It's very difficult. What is the definition of composing a song? When I was a child, composing a song, it was a melody and lyrics, and that was the song. So there was the person who wrote the melody, the other person was writing the lyrics. Sometimes the same person was writing both. It happened. But then they were going to the studio and they were doing arrangements on it, and then it was sometimes another person who was doing the arrangements. But that was when I was a child, and when I was a child we didn't have Fairlights and we didn't have all this stuff. Everything was made by a more simpler way and everything was recorded together, so it was more simple and in the same time more difficult to record. But anyway, so far it's difficult to get really an idea. However, if you go to listen to Tim Friese-Greene songs and go to listen to Hollis' song in his solo album or even in The Party's Over, you will see who writes the melodies. I think you know who it is. I think it's Hollis. I think you understood that. So the journalist says one of the fascinating things about Tok Tok is that there is no real pattern there. Each of their 5 albums could be 5 different bands, really. And yes, yes and no, because even if they are all different, we recognize Tok Tok from the beginning to the end. And actually we recognize Hollis because he was doing the most, and even in the Hollis solo album we recognize him. So Tim Friese-Greene, yes, I would agree with that, although to some extent I see the leap between the last 2 as being smaller and them having some similarities. I see Laughingstock as being a refinement of the whole of the Spirit of Eden, aesthetically really. Phil Brown, who engineered both those records, and I sat down before we did Laughingstock and we discussed some of the things that we didn't like about Spirit of Eden and in what way we would like to rectify them on the Laughingstock album. We saw it very much as an evolutionary thing rather than a revolutionary thing, which is what we had been looking at before that. So here I agree with Tim Friese-Greene. I really think that there is an evolution between Spirit of Eden and Laughingstock, but it's a little in the same direction. It's the continuation. It's not as different as The Color of Spring and Spirit of Eden, where the difference is so really clashing. For Laughingstock, it's really in the same direction, same kind of mood, even if it's not totally that. And then the journalist asks, did you do other things between 1983, when you first started working with Tok Tok, and 1991, when it all ended? So Tim Friese-Greene answers, I always made it my policy to try and do one record between Tok Tok albums, even though Tok Tok albums were exhausting to do, and I usually took a break after doing them, which was in convention to my previous policy of working back to back. It, however, became more difficult for me to find stuff that I wanted to do. I was okay between The Color of Spring and Spirit of Eden, but after Spirit of Eden, I found it really difficult to find anything that I found challenging enough. Tok Tok records were quite fulfilling. I didn't really feel that I was desperate to go off and do something else. The one thing I did try and do was go back to doing guitar bands again, just to kind of keep myself a bit roughed up. Spirit of Eden was only intermittently rough. I do like a lot of noise, really, which is why Laughingstock is a bit noisier. It is because I wanted it noisier. Okay, so Tim Friese-Greene, we have now an indication. Tim Friese-Greene is the I would say, the graffiter of the band. You know, in painting, it's like if you were doing things a little, like if the paint is a little damaged and worn. You know, it's not clean, it's not perfect. The same thing in music. Laughingstock, it's true, is noisier than Spirit of Eden, and it's much more, I try to find the word, much more trashy, yes, more trashy, much more rough, raw. It's what I like in Laughingstock. It doesn't mean that Mark Hollis didn't want that also. So then they are talking about the effects of Laughingstock, the fact that they were all depressed. He says that him and Mark didn't need a therapy after the recording of that album. I think it was probably tough on Phil Brown because he was in the studio, which was dark during a very long time, and to listen to always the same songs again and again during almost 1 year, it's probably very hard. I can imagine, I can understand that. I think I would become crazy to be in the dark so long. I like to see the sun and the sky and the birds. So then there is a question about the end of the collaboration. So the journalist is asking what they are feeling once you had done Laughingstock, that was it, that was the end of Talk Talk. And Tim Friese-Greene answers, I knew from halfway through Laughingstock that it would be the last album that I would make with Talk Talk. Nothing happened after Laughingstock to make me think again. It was always my intention after Laughingstock to go off and produce something else. I'm not quite sure whether at the point I had the thought that I would do what I did, but I felt that 4 albums was enough. I felt that Mark Hollis and I simply ran our course. We had a really good run of making records that constantly pushed things forward. I didn't see any way of moving further beyond that, and I wanted to go. Mark wasn't happy with that, but he didn't have any choice. He went away and decided what to do on his own. He released a solo album, Mark Hollis, in 1988. Sorry, once again. So he says that he was the one who wanted to go away and not work anymore with Mark Hollis. Mark Hollis said several times that he thought that Laughingstock was the last album by Talk Talk. So I'm not sure it's totally true what he said here. And even if it was, I don't think that it's very elegant to say it. That's my opinion. But I don't want to be mean. I have nothing against Tim Friese-Greene, but I think it's very delicate to say such things, you know. It can be a feeling which is around, and they both decide something, and then one person thinks that he was the one who decided, and actually the other person thinks that she was the one who decided, and it's very hard to know. I think that probably they felt both that it was not necessary to continue and that they had to do something else, and that was it. Who dumped who? Who cares? So the journalist, that is interesting. The journalist asks, how do you feel about Talk Talk's albums now? Do you still like listening to them? And Tim Friese-Greene answers, no, I don't, to be honest. I can listen to some of them more than others. The one that I actually have the most problem with is Spirit of Eden. When I said that to another journalist recently, he found it quite difficult to believe, but it is the one that bothers me the most. Laughingstock is abstract and difficult to kind of get a grip on, and I rather like that about it. It was recorded in a much more lo-fi way, lo-fi or lo-fi, I don't know, lo-fi way, which was a very deliberate policy on my behalf, and I like it much better for that. Spirit of Eden is a bit too clean for me. It gets on my nerves. It sounds a bit over-earnest to me now. It could do with a bit of humor on it somewhere as far as I'm concerned. and he laughs. So I understand what he means. It's true that Laughingstock is much more noisier, raw, rough than Spirit of Eden. Spirit of Eden, it's like if you arrive in paradise. Everything is clean, it's a light, it's like if you see God. You know, it's there is something religious, something divine, sacred. So, yes, Spirit of Eden is cleaner, but I think that that was the purpose of the album Spirit of Eden. The purpose was to create something very clean and perfect and almost magical, almost like if you arrived in the paradise and everything is white in a beautiful light, and there is nothing wrong and everything is perfect and God is in front of you. That's how I see Spirit of Eden. So if he regrets that now, it means, according to me, and that's my own opinion, that he didn't get completely what Spirit of Eden was about. He says a bit of humor on it. Spirit of Eden was not supposed to be humoristic. I don't think that it was the purpose, and I don't think that it was the right time for that. I think that Mark had a very good reason to do this album, Spirit of Eden, and it should be left as it is. It can't be improved. Spirit of Eden has to be as it is. I'm sorry for the noise outside. It's we are on Saturday and it's kind of scary, crazy, noisy. I hope you can hear me. It gives me an indication that Spirit of Eden, the melodies, are probably written by Mark Hollis, and that the whole spirit of Eden has been created by Mark Hollis, because he was the one who in the end decided of everything. And not everything can be noisy, rough, dirty, in the sound, I mean. So then they are talking about mostly Tim Friese-Greene career, but just one thing that I read. The journalist is asking, having done most of your songwriting in collaboration with Mark, how did you find starting to write songs for yourself? So Tim Friese-Greene answers, and that is what gives me the most information. I found it really liberating. One of the reasons that I won't go back to production is that when you are working by yourself, you can have an idea, however abstract, and not have to justify it, and not to have to explain it, and not have to try and convince anyone that for the next 5 days you want to work on this particular route. I don't have to do any of that. If I want to spend a week finding a bass sound, I can do that. If I want to spend 10 days finding the one chord that I can find in my head, but I just can't find on the guitar, I can do that. That's the sort of freedom I can get from working on my own. I get so much pleasure out of dealing with my own little deviations. It's a lot of fun. It can be very limiting making records for other musicians and for record companies. The record companies, particularly the major labels, want music to tick all the right boxes. Your bass drum has got to be punchy, your snare has got to be loud, your guitars have to be bright, your vocals have to be ridiculously loud. You are forced into a very rigid way of looking at it by the people paying the bills, especially with drums, bass and guitar music, and I found that incredibly limiting. The idea of never having to do that again is a total liberation for me. Whatever you want to do, you do, and there is no one else going, no, I don't want you to do it like that. So it's interesting because the journalist is asking him how he's writing songs, and he answers sounds. So once again, it comes back to my idea. Tim Friese-Greene was doing arrangements. He was not doing composition. And for me, writing a song, it's the composition, it's not the arrangements. if you listen to the Tim Friese-Greene songs that I like, but the melodies, the talk-talk melodies are not there. The talk-talk melodies are with Margolis. So I think that Margolis was writing the melodies and Tim Friese-Greene was there to do the arrangements. Maybe he was finding loops, gimmicks, things that we remember, but it's the arrangements. In France, there is a way to pay different people. Usually in France, I don't know if it's still like that, but a few years ago it was like that. For the rights for the author of the song, half was for the person who wrote the melody. The other part was for the person writing the lyrics. Then if there was someone who was doing the arrangements, they were taken from both, and usually 10%, when I was young it was 10%, maybe it changed now, was given to the arranger. That is how it used to work in France, and usually there was always an arranger because the arranger was more or less working for the production and they wanted to have their own arranger who was doing the thing as they wanted. So here Tim Friese-Greene is called producer, so I don't know if he's the one who is paying. I don't think so. So it's maybe an executive producer. He's the one who is organizing the expenses and saying we are going to do this and that. That is the producer in the sense here, not like in the sense in France. Obviously he was also doing the arrangements, so it's totally normal that a part of the rights that we usually give to the author go to Tim Friese-Greene, but the fact that he had the half of it, it seems to me quite a lot. If I'm right, I mean if he was just doing the arrangements. Now, if he was finding melodies or writing lyrics, then it's different. Then it's normal that he got half of it. All depends how he were doing. I'm still wondering, but you see, the journalist speaks of how are you writing your songs, and he answers, I'm doing my sounds like this and like that. Sounds, it's not writing a song. Writing a song is creating a melody. And go to listen to Tim Friese-Greene songs, there is not much of melodies. It's mostly a feeling. It's created above an arrangement. He started from the arrangements and then he created the melody, not the other way. And I think that Margolis is doing on the other way. He has a melody in mind first, and then he goes and creates the song. Maybe Margolis decided to give half of his rights to Tim Friese-Greene to encourage him to stay with him. Maybe, I don't know. You know, I say that, but I know nothing. I can just give you my feeling. I'm not convinced of anything. So the journalist says you were given a lot of freedom with Talk Talk, especially with Spirit of Eden and Laughing Stock. In some ways, then, is that a continuation of what happened in Talk Talk? And Tim Friese-Greene answers, yes, to a degree. I would quantify that, though, by saying that even with someone that I felt sympathetic with musically like Mark, there were still channels that I had to move down. There wasn't any point in me saying, okay, let's go over here, because I knew what would work for Mark and what wouldn't. Although there were boundaries that I was largely sympathetic to, there were still boundaries, whereas Heligoland, from me anyway, possibly had no boundaries. So basically he's saying that he's the true crazy creator and that Margolis had his boundaries. When we listen to the Margolis solo album, I think that we see that it seems a little exaggerated. You know, Tim Friese-Greene probably made a lot of money with The Color of Spring and even with Spirit of Eden and hopefully with Laughing Stock. and probably with It's My Life too. I think he shouldn't talk like that about Marcolis. I didn't have more battery on the other camera. Okay, I don't understand that. I don't understand that someone can make so much money with a band and then criticizing. I mean, even he can think things. He doesn't need to say it to a journalist. I mean, he can keep that for himself, and he should say thank you for giving me all the money that I receive every year for that work, which was probably not unpleasant at all. You know, I've been working for a company during 6 years, Rougier Play, which is a store. They didn't behave very well at the end with me, and I had to sue them because they fired me for a not right reason. Nevertheless, I still keep a good memory of my 5 first years there. I learned a lot, and I thank them for that. I think we should still see the positive part of the thing. And you know, the ex-owner of this company, because he sold his company, I met him in the street, I crossed him, and he said hello, and he was not mad at me at all, because he knew that he didn't behave very well with me, and he knew I was right. I just defended my rights. It doesn't mean that I don't like this store and that I didn't like what I did there. I think we should always respect the opportunities we get and we got, and to thank the universe to have made us cross this path at a point. Tim Friese-Greene, we probably wouldn't hear of him much now if it was not for Tok Tok. That's what I want to say. Then I'm going to try to be faster. So the journalist is asking, how do you write your lyrics? And he answers, I have very strict rules about lyrics when I insist on adhering to. I have to enjoy singing them, and they have to be very singable. They also have to look good on the page. Generally, you find that most people's lyrics fit one of the two categories. I don't think that most people's lyrics fulfill both. You either have lyrics that work well as poetry or look good on the page, and they don't sing particularly well, or they sing fantastic. But when you write them down, you think that really is a bit crap. Both those criteria have to be fulfilled for me to be able to want to keep them. I do take the intelligence of lyric really seriously. I don't mean intelligence in terms of using long words. I mean in being able to find a format for lyrics which possibly hasn't been explored that much before. Whoa. So I don't get what he's saying. I think lyrics, they come automatically when you have a melody. You can almost hear them in your head. That's how, according to me, we should write lyrics. I don't know what he's talking about, and I think it's a little pretentious to say. I'm sorry, Mr. Tim Friese-Greene, you seem very sympathetic, but I don't get everything you are saying here. However, I don't dismiss his work. I absolutely respect his work. I absolutely respect this person. He's probably very talented. I just regret that he decided to stop when it was probably the most interesting. I like Heligoland. I like one of the songs on the album. I really think there is a big potential there, but I don't get why putting so many barriers. And I think that music should be taken seriously, but also with a little fun. That's my opinion. I mean, creating must be something that we appreciate and enjoy. It's not only to look good in front of people. That's my opinion. Anyway, I'm going to stop now because the video is going to be very long. I had much more memory on the camera I used, and I'm afraid of how much time it's going to take to edit, but never mind. I wanted to talk about that. Just to finish, I will say I think that Marcolis' melodies are his, and that Tim Friese-Greene did mostly the arrangements with the agreement of Marcolis. Anyway, if you read the Phil Brown's book, you see how they were working, but I really think that the main author is Marcolis, and people who say that Marcolis is nothing without Tim Friese-Greene. Please go to listen to The Party's Over and go to listen to the Mark Hollis solo album, and you will see that Mark Hollis could do a lot by himself, and he proved it. I hope you didn't hear too much my fan, but it's too hot. I can't make it without my fan. See you very soon. Bye bye. Bye bye.